I was hunched over my laptop in the dim glow of my office, the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing like a nervous heartbeat above me. The clock read 11:42 p.m. My inbox pinged with nothing but work updates, until a new message popped up. No sender, no subject, only an image. I clicked it, expecting some prank or glitch, and froze. The photo was grainy, but the shapes were unmistakable. My wife was letting a man into our house. I could see her hand on the door, the faint glow of our hallway light spilling over her back. I stared at it. The quiet office suddenly too loud, my stomach twisting into knots. I leaned back, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was old, maybe it wasn't even her. But every instinct in my body screamed the opposite. I could almost hear the click of the door in real life. My phone buzzed again with a second photo, this time showing him stepping inside. I rubbed my face, tasting the metallic tang of panic in my mouth. The office suddenly felt suffocating, and the shadows in the corners seemed alive, whispering questions I didn't want to answer. I had to see for myself. I grabbed my coat, the leather stiff and cold against my skin, and my keys, and left without a word. Outside, the night air hit me like ice, sharp and unforgiving. Every step toward home felt heavier than the last, like the world was pressing down, testing how far I could bend before breaking. I didn't know what I would find when I got there. I didn't know if I was ready to confront the truth. All I knew was that the next few minutes would change everything. The street was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes every creak of a branch sound like a warning. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles burned. I parked a few houses down, hiding in the shadows, watching. The glow from our porch light cut a pale circle across the driveway. Through the window, I saw her again. She was laughing, or at least, the curve of her mouth suggested it, but it was a laugh that didn't belong to me. The man she had let in leaned close, talking, and I felt the world tilt. I wanted to throw the car in reverse, to run far away, but I couldn't. I had to know. I got out and moved silently, each footstep a careful negotiation with the asphalt. I reached the edge of the driveway, my chest tight, ears straining. They were inside now, voices low but urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel the betrayal like static in my bones. I pulled my phone from my pocket, staring at it like it might give me answers I wasn't ready for. Another message, this time just text. You should see this in person. No name, no hint. Only my pulse drumming in my ears. I crouched closer to the window, every muscle coiled. The smell of their cologne, faint but sharp, drifted out as the door cracked open for a moment. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief so intense, it burned my throat. I wanted to storm in, demand answers, make someone pay, but I stayed hidden, watching, listening, the betrayal unfolding like a slow, deliberate wound. I didn't move until they went to the living room, leaving the hallway empty. Then I slipped back to my car, hands shaking. I needed a plan. I needed to understand what I was walking into. I needed something to hold on to, because the man in our living room was a stranger, and the woman I loved seemed to be letting him take everything from me. I spent the rest of the night parked in the shadows, staring at my house as if my eyes alone could make sense of what I'd seen. Every time I thought about turning my car around, driving miles away, I felt a pang of shame. I wasn't ready to leave, not without answers. The air was sharp and cold, cutting through my jacket, and I breathed it in, tasting metal and frost. I imagined her in our kitchen, the way she used to hum while cooking, and the image that came up instead made my stomach twist. Her leaning close to him, the warmth I remembered gone, replaced with secrecy. By the time the sky began to lighten, I realized I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. My phone had blown up with notifications I ignored, but the memory of that first anonymous message kept running through my mind, like a loop I couldn't break. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them there, in my house, in my life, and I clenched my fists so hard I thought my nails would break. Finally, I made a move. I couldn't just sit in my car forever. I walked up to the door, every step deliberate, ears straining for the slightest sound inside. The doorknob was cold under my hand, and I tested it. It was locked. My heart sank. I leaned my forehead against the door, the wood rough against my skin, and wondered how I had reached this point, how a simple life, job, house, family, had twisted into something I didn't recognize. I backed away, realizing I couldn't confront this blind. I needed evidence, needed clarity. Pulling out my phone again, I thought about calling her, demanding an explanation, but the words died in my throat. The betrayal was too raw. Instead, I drove around the block, thinking, planning. I needed a vantage point, somewhere I could watch, somewhere I could gather the truth without tipping them off. Hours passed. Morning arrived with a bitter light that made everything in the neighborhood look washed out, like reality itself had been drained. I parked near a tree at the corner and waited, watching the blinds, the slight movement, every shadow that hinted at life inside. When he appeared on the porch, cigarette in hand, I could see his casual confidence, the kind of arrogance that made my blood boil. He didn't know I was watching. He had no idea I was even alive in this scene, a ghost in my own story. She came out after him, coffee in hand, hair slightly messy from sleep. She didn't notice me. She smiled at him. Something in the tilt of her head, the curve of her mouth, that made me sick. That wasn't her. Not the woman I loved. And yet, I remembered when I first saw her. The same warmth in her eyes, the same laugh that once made the world feel lighter. I realized I didn't know her anymore. Or maybe I never had. I watched for hours, heart hammering, mind spinning. I followed him when he left, keeping my distance, noting the places they went, the times they returned. I began to piece together patterns, little habits that might explain what I was missing, or confirm my worst fears. Every smell of coffee, every creak of a floorboard, every muted laugh became a thread I couldn't ignore. By evening, I was exhausted, but determined. I knew I couldn't wait forever. I had to confront this. I had to face her, and I had to understand why my life was unraveling like this. And as I parked down the street once more, the sun dipping low, I felt the first flicker of resolve. I wasn't going to crumble. Not yet. Not without a fight. That night, I barely slept. I sat in my car again, engine off, staring at the darkened house like it held all the answers I needed. My mind was a storm. Anger, confusion, disbelief, all twisting together in a way that made my chest tight and my jaw ache. I remembered the first time we bought this house, the way she ran through the rooms laughing, how the walls smelled of fresh paint and promise. Now the same walls felt like a cage. I thought about confronting her directly, about barging in and demanding explanations, but something stopped me. I wasn't sure I could handle what I'd hear. Every scenario played out in my head, each worse than the last. And yet, the thought of doing nothing, of letting this go unexamined, made me feel hollow, like I was slowly erasing myself. I had to see it for myself, had to know the truth. I remembered my old friend Marcus once telling me, "You can't fight shadows. You need the light on them, see what they really are." That's what I needed now. Evidence. Clarity. I couldn't rely on assumptions no matter how convincing. So I started planning. I went through the motions in my head. Routes, angles, times. Every detail mattered. By midnight I was back on the street, sitting in my usual spot. I pulled my jacket tighter, the leather cold against my skin, and I lit a cigarette, the smoke tangling with the night air. Each drag steadied me a little, focused me. Hours passed. I watched the lights flicker inside the house, followed shadows that moved like secrets in the hallways. Then I saw him again. The man from the photos. He came to the door carrying something. A box, maybe, or groceries. She greeted him, smiling, her hand brushing his arm. That smile. It was the one I remembered, the one I thought was mine alone. My chest constricted. I could feel every muscle tighten, the air in my lungs sharp and metallic. I wanted to run, scream, smash the door down, but I stayed hidden, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles bled. I began to notice things I hadn't before. The way he lingered near her when I thought she was alone. The way she didn't glance toward the driveway even once. Small signs, but enough. My mind raced, trying to stitch them together into a story, a reason, anything that made sense. But all I could feel was betrayal. Hours later, they finally left, walking down the street together, laughing softly. I followed at a distance, heart pounding, mind spinning. They went to a small diner on the corner, the kind that smelled of burnt coffee and frying bacon, and sat in a booth near the back. I stayed across the street, crouched behind a dumpster, watching every move, noting every glance. That's when I realized something crucial. He didn't belong here. He was an outsider. He didn't have the history, the shared life, the years that bound me to her. And for the first time that night, a thought surfaced. Maybe this wasn't just betrayal. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe there was a reason, a story behind this that I didn't know. But the thought brought little comfort. Because no matter what the reason, he was here. He was inside my home. He was inside my life. And I couldn't let that stand. Not without answers. Not without reclaiming what was mine. I drove home when they left, each stoplight stretching time into eternity. I parked in the driveway, staring at the door that had become a barrier between the past and the present. I clenched my fists, feeling the calluses dig into my palms. Tonight, I realized something. I wasn't going to sit back. I was going to confront this, and I would do it on my terms. The night was heavy, oppressive, but for the first time, I felt a spark of control. I wasn't a victim in my own life. I wasn't powerless. I would face her. I would demand the truth, and whatever it was, I would survive it. The morning came slow and gray, the kind of light that makes everything look pale and hollow. I couldn't wait. I needed answers, needed to face her before the day blurred into another stretch of doubt and suspicion. I walked into the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast and coffee filling the room, her humming low and calm. My heart pounded like a drum, each beat a warning and a challenge all at once. She looked up, surprised. "You're home early," she said, her voice casual. But I saw the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, the tiny tell that something was off. I didn't answer. I leaned against the counter, fists tight, trying to steady my breathing, my nerves jangling like electricity. "Is everything okay?" she asked, taking a sip of her coffee. That question should have calmed me, but it did the opposite. Her calm, her normalcy, it felt like mockery. I swallowed hard. "I got a photo," I said finally, my voice low but steady. "Someone sent it to me last night. You letting a man into our house." Her eyes widened, just a fraction, and then she blinked, forcing her composure back. "What? Who would? Don't lie to me," I snapped, cutting her off. The words hit the air like glass shattering. I could feel the anger rolling off me, hot and sharp. "I saw it. I saw him. I watched last night. Who is he? And why are you letting him in?" She put her coffee down, fingers trembling slightly, and I caught the faintest hint of guilt, or was it fear, in her eyes. She opened her mouth, then closed it, thinking. My chest tightened, the silence stretching between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, she spoke. He's helping me with something," she said, voice small, almost fragile. "Something you wouldn't understand. It's temporary, I swear." I shook my head, incredulous. "Temporary? You're in our house, our life, and you're smiling at him like he belongs here. I don't understand. What the hell could justify this?" Her hands went to her face, pressing against her temples. "It's complicated. I didn't want you to know like this. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. Please, just trust me." Trust? The word hung in the air, mocking me. I felt every nerve in my body taut with tension. My senses screamed at me. The smell of coffee, the faint perfume that was hers, the warm sunlight creeping through the blinds, all mixing into a scene that felt surreal, wrong, yet painfully real. I wanted to believe her, wanted desperately to trust, but every instinct told me this was a lie. I didn't respond. I turned, walked to the door, hand on the knob. My mind raced. Fight, leave, confront him, confront her. Every option carried weight, danger, consequences. But I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't let this go without knowing the truth, without seeing it all laid bare. I paused at the threshold, hand on the doorknob. "I'm going to find out," I said finally. Not a threat, not a promise, but a vow. Everything. I'm going to see what's really happening, and I'll decide after that. Her eyes followed me, wide, uncertain, but she didn't stop me. She didn't argue. That small hesitation, her silence, spoke louder than anything she could say. I stepped outside, feeling the weight of the day settle over me like armor. I didn't know what I would find. Didn't know if I could handle the truth. But one thing was clear. I wasn't letting this go. Not now, not ever. I spent the next day moving through a haze of strategy and suspicion. Every step I took, every interaction I had, was filtered through the lens of last night. At work, I could barely focus. The hum of computers and the chatter of coworkers were distant echoes. My mind replayed the photos, her smile, the way he had leaned so casually in my living room as if it were his own. I could feel my blood pressure spike just thinking about it. By evening, I decided I couldn't wait for her explanations to materialize. I had to confront reality on my own terms. I drove slowly around the neighborhood, parking a block away, watching the front of my house like a hawk. I wasn't sure what I expected. Him to appear? To catch them in some undeniable act? But I didn't want assumptions. I wanted truth. The air smelled faintly of rain and asphalt, the kind of scent that sticks to your skin after a long night. It grounded me, kept me tethered to the world even as my emotions threatened to swallow me. Then I saw movement. He emerged from the front door, carrying a bag, talking softly into his phone. She followed, adjusting her jacket, her expression calm. I tensed. I could feel my heart in my throat, every nerve firing at once. The world seemed to shrink until all I could see was them, walking toward a sleek black car parked across the street. I followed from a safe distance, careful not to draw attention. They drove a few miles, winding through side streets and industrial blocks, before stopping at a small, run-down cafe tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. I parked a block away and watched from behind a fence, the smell of gasoline from passing cars mixing with the faint aroma of frying bacon from inside the diner. Through the window, I could see them sitting at a booth, leaning close, talking quietly. She laughed softly, the sound carrying through the glass and into my chest like a punch. I clenched my fists. I wanted to storm in, grab her, demand answers, make him understand that he didn't belong in my life, but I held back. Watching quietly gave me control. I could see everything, note everything, gather the proof I needed. And as much as it hurt, I realized I needed more than anger. I needed strategy. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Hours passed. I watched them leave, drive back toward home, unaware that I followed, maintaining distance. Every turn they made, every pause, I memorized. I wasn't just observing, I was cataloging, analyzing, preparing for what I would do next. By the time they returned, night had fallen, the street lights casting long shadows across the pavement. Back home, I stayed in the shadows again, crouched near the edge of the driveway, phone in hand, thinking through every possible confrontation. I could hear her moving inside, the faint creak of floorboards under her steps, the subtle rustle of fabric as she walked. Every sound made me tense, every movement a reminder that my life was no longer my own. And yet, beneath all the anger, beneath the betrayal, there was a spark of something else. Determination, control. I realized that no matter what she was hiding, no matter who he was, I still had my life. I still had my choices. And I was done being passive. I would find the truth. I would face it. And whatever came next, I would decide my path. The next day felt heavy, like the air itself knew what was coming. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't stop the images of them in my living room from playing over and over in my mind. Every tap of a keyboard, every low murmur from a coworker sounded distant and hollow, as if I were underwater. I could taste the metallic tang of tension in my mouth. By noon, I realized I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to act. I needed to see what was happening inside my own home with my own eyes. I spent the afternoon preparing, methodically. I went over every detail. The layout of the house, the times I had seen him come and go, her habits, the way she moved, the way he lingered. I knew the streets near my house, every alley, every tree, every shadow that could give me cover. I drove through the neighborhood slowly, pretending to be casual, while memorizing angles and escape routes. I felt my pulse rise with each turn, the anticipation knotting my stomach. Every detail mattered. Every move I made could tip the balance. Night fell, and I parked a block away, crouched behind the trunk of an old oak tree, the bark rough under my hands. I could smell the faint smoke of someone's backyard fire mixing with the crisp autumn air. From here, I could see the front porch, the faint glow of the hallway lights spilling through the curtains. Every time the door opened, my heart skipped a beat. Then he appeared. He was carrying a small box this time, moving with the casual confidence of a man who thought he belonged. She greeted him with that same smile that made my chest ache. The way she leaned in, the tilt of her head, the curve of her lips. It was all wrong. My mind raced, cycling through anger, disbelief, and hurt. I wanted to storm the door, to tear the truth from her mouth and him from my house. But I stayed still, silent, watching. They moved inside, and I took a breath, the cool air sharp against my lungs. I pulled my phone from my pocket, jotting mental notes, recording times and actions in my head like a detective. I could hear the faint sounds of movement from inside. Footsteps, the clink of a cup, the soft rustle of fabric. Every sound was a thread in the story I was unraveling. Hours passed. I watched them leave again, this time heading toward the same diner as before. I followed, keeping a careful distance, crouching behind fences, sliding into parking lots, careful not to be seen. They were unaware. They had no idea I was tracking every step. I could see the way he leaned close to her, how her hand brushed against his. My stomach twisted, but I kept going. I needed clarity. I needed proof. Inside the diner, they sat in the back, away from the windows. I stayed across the street, crouched behind a low brick wall, the smell of frying bacon and stale coffee drifting over me. I watched every movement, every gesture. She laughed again, that same laugh, and I felt my hands tighten into fists so hard my nails bit into my palms. Anger surged, but beneath it, a steely determination formed. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't a passive observer in my own life. I had choices. I had control. When they left, I followed again, driving slowly, carefully. By the time they returned home, night had fully set in, the streetlights casting long shadows over the driveway. I parked a block away and waited, crouched low, muscles tense, heart hammering. The house was quiet now, except for the faint rustle of her moving inside. I could hear it even from here, every sound amplified, sharp and precise. I knew then that tonight I would act. I wasn't going to wait for the next anonymous photo, for the next whispered secret. I would confront them, confront her, face the truth, whatever it was, on my own terms. And as I slid from the car, my jacket brushing against the cold metal, I realized that no matter what came next, I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him, not of her, not of the truth. I would reclaim my life. I didn't sleep that night. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not with him in my house, not with her acting like everything was normal while my world quietly crumbled around me. I spent hours sitting in my car, headlights off, engine running, staring at the glow of our front porch light. Every second felt heavy, pressing into my chest like a physical weight. I replayed every detail from the last few days, every movement, every smile, every subtle gesture, trying to piece together the puzzle that had suddenly overtaken my life. I thought about confronting her directly at first. I imagined bursting into the house, yelling, demanding answers. But I knew that wouldn't work. Not now. My rage would make me reckless. I needed clarity. I needed control. I had to see for myself who he really was, and why he had become a fixture in the house I'd built with her. So I waited. Hours crawled by as I crouched low near the driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The autumn air was crisp and sharp, filling my lungs with each breath, making me feel alive and terrified all at once. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves behind the house, the distant bark of a dog, the low hum of passing traffic. Every sound became amplified, like a warning I couldn't ignore. Then I saw him. He stepped out of the house carrying a small toolbox, moving with that same casual confidence that made my blood boil. She came out behind him carrying 2 cups of coffee, her smile soft and easy. They didn't notice me at first, chatting quietly, laughing in a way that was just close enough to intimate to hurt. My chest tightened, and I had to force myself to stay still, to remain hidden. I could almost smell his cologne, sharp and unfamiliar, mixing with the faint sweetness of her perfume. It was infuriating. He belonged nowhere near this life, and yet he occupied it effortlessly. I followed them at a distance, keeping to the shadows, careful not to draw attention. They moved slowly through the streets, and I memorized every turn, every pause, every gesture. I realized that if I was going to confront this, I had to know everything. I had to understand him, understand her, understand how they had found a way into the space that was mine. Every instinct screamed at me to act immediately, but I stayed patient. Observation gave me power. Impulsiveness would only cost me control. They eventually stopped at a small hardware store on the outskirts of town. He leaned against the counter while she selected a few items, speaking softly to the clerk. I stayed across the street, crouched behind a low brick wall, watching. The neon signs flickered overhead, casting a distorted glow over the scene. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears, the heat of anger and fear mixing with determination. I wanted to confront him right there, to shove him, to demand he leave, but I stayed put. I needed more than anger. I needed the truth. Hours later, they returned to the house, moving with casual ease, unaware of my presence. I followed them, keeping my distance, crouching low when they entered the driveway. I watched as he carried the box inside, placing it carefully on the counter, and as she leaned over to examine the contents. My mind raced, filling in possibilities, imagining explanations, each one more twisted and heartbreaking than the last. I realized then that I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't just observe. I had to act. I couldn't allow this intrusion to continue, couldn't let my life be stolen in slow, quiet increments. I parked a block away, planning my approach, thinking through every possible scenario. I imagined knocking on the door, asking her directly. I imagined confronting him, demanding he leave. I imagined the confrontation ending in chaos or tears or anger, but I knew I had to face it anyway. When I finally stepped out of the car, the night air bit through my jacket, sharp and invigorating. My fists clenched at my sides, the rough leather of my gloves biting into my palms. Every muscle was tense, every nerve on high alert. I walked slowly, deliberately toward the house, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on me. I could hear the faint creak of floorboards, the soft murmur of voices inside. My chest burned with anticipation and rage, my senses sharpened to an almost painful degree. I paused at the front door, hand on the knob, and took a deep breath. I could smell coffee, faintly burnt toast, and that subtle sweetness that was hers. The combination made my stomach twist. I could hear them moving inside faintly like shadows brushing against reality. And then I realized something. I wasn't afraid. Not of him, not of her, not of the truth. I had been pushed to the edge, had been watching my life unravel, and I was still standing. I had control. I had resolve. I opened the door. The door swung open slowly, the familiar creak sounding louder than it ever had, as if the house itself knew the tension in the air. The warm glow from the hallway lights hit me immediately, illuminating the scene I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. She froze for a split second, coffee cup in hand, eyes widening as she saw me standing there. Then, almost instantly, her expression flattened into something neutral, practiced, like she had expected me to confront her eventually. I can't explain, she began, but her words stumbled over themselves. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, the click echoing like a starting gun. The smell of coffee and faint perfume hit me full force, mingling with the sharper, unfamiliar scent of his cologne. Every muscle in my body was tense, my fists clenched at my sides. "Explain what?" I demanded, my voice low, controlled, but threaded with an anger I could barely contain. "Explain why there's a man in my house, in my life, in my marriage? Why you think this is okay?" She hesitated, setting the cup down on the counter. Her hands shook just slightly, but she tried to hide it. "It's not what you think," she said. "I didn't want you to find out this way, but he's helping me." I laughed, but it was hollow, bitter. "Helping you? With what? Breaking my trust? Inviting strangers into my home? Pretending like everything's fine while my world crumbles?" My chest burned, and I felt the edges of my vision blur with rage. "I've been watching for days. I've been following you. And for what? To see you smile at him? Touch him like he belongs? She flinched at the words, but still tried to hold her ground. It's temporary. I promise. I didn't know how to tell you. I needed to keep it private until I could make it right. Make it right? I shot back. How do you make this right? By lying? By hiding? By letting him cross every line I thought was ours? My voice was rising now, shaking with tension. I could feel the blood pumping in my temples, in my neck, like it was trying to escape. I could smell her faint perfume, and it made me sick and longing at the same time. A cruel contradiction. He stepped forward then, cautiously, as if sensing the storm in the room. I don't want trouble, he said quietly, almost defensively, but his presence alone pushed every nerve in me closer to snapping. My gaze locked on him, and I saw the arrogance, the casual intrusion of someone who believed he had a place where he didn't belong. Get out, I said sharply, voice controlled, icy. Both of you. Now. She hesitated, biting her lip, her eyes pleading. But I couldn't waver. Not now. My house. My life. My rules. I said, now. They moved slowly, reluctantly, gathering their things. I followed them to the door, watching, every movement exaggerated in my mind. He lingered for a second too long, giving me a smirk that made my blood boil. I wanted to grab him, shove him into the street, make him understand that no one, no matter how persuasive or charming, crossed into my life without consequences. When the door closed behind them, I sank against the wall, chest heaving, trying to draw in steady breaths. The room smelled faintly of coffee and tension, the silence after their departure almost deafening. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling the ache in my shoulders, in my jaw. Every fiber of my being was wound tight, but beneath the rage, beneath the hurt, there was a strange clarity forming. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't passive. I had taken control of the first moment, and now the next steps were mine to decide. She watched me from across the room, guilt and fear written across her face. I wanted to protect you, she said softly, almost a whisper, but it carried weight. I didn't want you to get hurt or involved before I had the chance to fix it. Protect me? I asked, voice low, dangerous. You've done nothing but tear me apart from the inside out. I don't need protection. I need the truth, and I'll decide what to do with it myself. For a moment the room was silent, charged with the aftermath of confrontation. I could hear my own heartbeat, steadying slowly, each beat a reminder that I was still standing, still alive, still in control. I realized then that this was the turning point. No more waiting, no more shadows, no more anonymous photos. The next steps, whatever they were, would be deliberate. I would navigate them. I would reclaim what was mine. I turned, walking through the kitchen, the floor cold beneath my feet, my senses still heightened, the smell of coffee and faint perfume lingering in the air. She followed, hesitant, silent. I didn't look back. Not yet. Tonight the confrontation had ended, but the reckoning was only beginning. I could feel it in my chest, heavy and insistent. I had taken the first step. I had faced the betrayal. And now, everything that followed, truth, resolution, consequences, was mine to shape. The house felt different after they left, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I paced the kitchen, the cold tile pressing into my feet, every step a drumbeat in the quiet, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the occasional creak of the floorboards. All of it seemed louder now, amplified by the tension that still throbbed in my chest. I sat at the counter, rubbing my face, trying to steady my thoughts. Anger was still there, sharp and raw, but beneath it something else had started to grow. Focus. I realized I couldn't let this linger, couldn't let her secrets define our lives any longer. I needed clarity, proof, understanding, everything I had been chasing in the shadows over the past week. And now, finally, I could act with purpose, not just blind suspicion. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos again. The anonymous messages, the timestamps. Each one was a puzzle piece, and now, for the first time, I had a framework to start putting them together. I traced their steps over the past days, every movement, every place they had gone. Each detail mattered. Every small observation became part of the larger picture I was constructing. I thought about confronting her again, but differently this time. Not in rage, not as a victim, but with strategy. I needed to understand his role, his intentions, and her motivations. I needed answers on my terms, not hers. I couldn't just react. I had to anticipate. The house, once a sanctuary, had become a chessboard, and I was finally thinking 3 moves ahead. Hours passed. The night pressed against the windows, dark and still, the air smelling faintly of damp leaves and distant rain. I could hear the faint hum of the city beyond our street, cars passing, the occasional siren, all normal in contrast to the storm brewing inside me. My thoughts circled back to her smile, her excuses, her hesitation. I realized that she was scared too, but fear didn't absolve betrayal. Not this kind. I moved to the living room, scanning the furniture, the small personal items that once brought comfort now feeling foreign. I noticed a subtle shift in the air, the faint trace of his presence, an unfamiliar scent lingering near the sofa, a folded newspaper that wasn't ours, small, almost invisible signs of intrusion. It was enough to make my skin crawl. I ran my hands over the couch, feeling the texture of the fabric, the indentation of someone else's weight. Every detail confirmed what I already knew. He had crossed a line, and she had let him. I sat down heavily, letting my thoughts settle for a moment. I replayed the confrontation in my mind, her pleading, his hesitation, the moment I forced them out. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control. I had acted. I had set boundaries. And now, the next step was to understand why. Why she had let him into our lives, and why she had risked everything we had built. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I stared at it, heart racing, but this time I didn't panic. The message was simple. Meet me, midnight, warehouse by the docks. No name, no explanation, just the address. I felt a pulse of both dread and determination. This could be the next piece of the puzzle, the key to understanding everything, or it could be a trap. Either way, I couldn't ignore it. I spent the next hours preparing, making sure I was ready for whatever awaited me. I dressed in dark clothes, shoes silent against the pavement, and checked every item I might need. Phone, flashlight, keys. My senses were on high alert, every sound, every shadow, every flicker of movement scrutinized. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew I would face it head-on. No hesitation, no doubt, no fear. When midnight finally arrived, I stepped into the night, the cool air biting through my jacket, and started walking toward the docks. The city was quiet, almost eerie, the hum of distant traffic fading into silence. Each step felt deliberate, each breath steadying me, sharpening my focus. I was walking into the unknown, but I was no longer a passive observer in my life. I was taking it back, one step at a time. By the time I reached the warehouse, its outline looming like a shadow against the moonlit sky, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and clarity. I had chased the truth this far. Now whatever was waiting inside, I would confront it. No more watching, no more guessing. The answers were here, and I was ready. The warehouse loomed like a beast in the night, dark and hulking against the faint glow of the city behind it. My footsteps echoed against the empty street as I approached, each one deliberate, measured. The salty tang of the nearby river drifted on the wind, sharp and biting, mixing with the metallic scent of the docks. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears, a steady drum of anticipation and tension. This was it, the moment where the unknown became reality. I paused at the entrance, glancing at the shadows that clung to the corrugated metal walls. The old building looked abandoned, but I could sense movement inside. A faint light flickered through a high window, casting thin, erratic beams across the cracked pavement. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill my lungs, and pushed the door open slowly. The warehouse smelled of oil, dust, and decay. Every sound I made, my shoes against the concrete floor, my breathing, the rustle of my jacket, seemed to echo endlessly. I moved forward cautiously, scanning the darkness for any sign of them, and then I saw him. The man from my house was standing near a table, a single lamp casting a harsh glow over his features. He looked up, startled, but not afraid. "You came," he said, voice low, almost casual. I didn't answer. I stepped closer, eyes locked on him, the anger and betrayal coiling tight inside me. Why are you in my life? I demanded. Why are you in my house? Who are you, really? He shifted uneasily, glancing toward the shadows at the far end of the warehouse. Then she emerged. My wife stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. I wanted him to help me, she said softly, almost pleading, but her eyes were steady. I didn't know how else to fix it. Fix what? I snapped, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. My fists clenched, the leather of my gloves biting into my palms. By letting him into our home? By lying to me? How is this fixing anything? She swallowed hard, taking a step closer. It's about the money, the debts. I didn't want you involved, not yet. I thought I could manage it, handle it without dragging you into the mess. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. I froze, the words cutting through the fog of anger. Debts, money. This wasn't just betrayal, it was desperation, fear. And suddenly I saw him differently, not just as an intruder, but as someone she had relied on to navigate a dangerous situation she couldn't face alone. My chest tightened, conflicted emotions fighting for dominance. Anger, relief, betrayal, understanding. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice quieter now, but still sharp. Why all the lies? The hiding? I was afraid, she admitted, the words trembling from her lips. Afraid you'd blame me. Afraid you'd leave me. I thought I could fix it before you ever had to know. He shifted again, clearly uncomfortable under my gaze. I didn't want trouble, he said quietly. I was just helping her. That's it. I stared at him for a long moment, the tension in my shoulders slowly easing, though my chest still burned. I could feel the weight of the past week pressing against me. Every lie, every secret, every shadow. But now I had clarity. I understood the situation, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had some control again. I exhaled slowly, the cool air of the warehouse filling my lungs. We fix this together, I said finally, my voice calm but firm. No more lies, no more secrets. Whatever this is, we deal with it, together. And you, I said turning to him, stay out of my house unless I say otherwise. They nodded, understanding the weight of my words. For the first time in days, the room felt lighter, the tension easing just enough to let a flicker of hope slip through. I realized then that the real confrontation wasn't just about him. It was about us, about trust, honesty, and the boundaries we were willing to fight for. As we left the warehouse together, walking back into the cool night air, I felt something shift inside me. The anger hadn't vanished, and the betrayal hadn't disappeared. But now I had a path forward. I could face this. I could reclaim my life. And for the first time in a long while, I believed we might survive this storm, together. The drive home was quiet, the city streets washed in the pale glow of streetlights. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, staring straight ahead, trying to process everything I had just learned. The anger, the betrayal, the fear, they hadn't disappeared, but they had shifted. They were no longer a storm controlling me. They were tools, sharpened into clarity. I knew now what had been happening, why she had done what she did, and for the first time, I could see a path forward. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different, familiar yet foreign. The glow of the hallway light, once a symbol of intrusion and betrayal, now seemed almost neutral, just a house, just walls and rooms. I stepped inside carefully, every sense alert, but not for danger this time. I wanted to understand, to rebuild, to reclaim the life that had been slipping through my fingers. She was waiting in the living room, her posture tense, but her eyes calm. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I sank into the couch, the leather cold beneath me, and let out a slow breath. "I'm clearer," I said finally. "Angry, yes. Hurt, yes. But I understand now. I see the situation, and I know the truth, and I know we can fix this." She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have trusted you. I should have told you. I wanted to protect us, but I only made things worse." "You did what you thought you had to," I said, voice calm. "But the key now is what we do next. We rebuild. We set boundaries. No more secrets. And if we can do that, we can survive this. She reached for my hand, her fingers warm against mine, and for the first time in days, I felt a small, fragile relief settle in my chest. It wasn't complete, not yet, but it was a start. We had faced the storm together, and we were still standing. I thought about the man from the warehouse. He had been a tool, nothing more. His presence had tested us, forced us into truth, and now he had no place here. I had made that clear, and the tension that had haunted the past week was finally beginning to fade. We sat together in silence for a while, the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock the only sounds. It felt ordinary, mundane, but it was precious. Ordinary life had become something to fight for, something to protect, and I realized that the small moments, the warmth of her hand in mine, the faint aroma of coffee in the kitchen, the quiet of the house at night, were what mattered most. Later, as I stood by the window looking out at the street bathed in moonlight, I felt a sense of resolution settle over me. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also revealed strength I hadn't known I possessed. I could face challenges, confront fear, and reclaim control over my life. And I would. She came up behind me, resting her head lightly on my shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not giving up, for fighting, for believing we could get through this." I didn't answer immediately. I just held her, feeling the weight of the past week ease slightly. "We'll get through it," I said finally. "Together. No more secrets. No more lies. Whatever comes next, we face it as a team." The night stretched on, quiet and calm. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent to our struggles. But inside, we had taken the first steps toward reclaiming what mattered. Trust would take time to rebuild. Wounds would take time to heal. But for the first time, I could see a future where we stood on solid ground again. Together. I turned to her, squeezing her hand, and felt the faintest smile tug at the corners of my mouth. The storm had passed, and though the sky was still dark, I could see the faintest glimmer of dawn on the horizon. The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting thin, warm stripes across the living room floor. The house smelled faintly of brewed coffee and something baked, probably the small batch of muffins she'd made earlier. I sat at the kitchen table watching her move with her familiar, effortless rhythm, and for the first time in days, it felt like life could settle back into something resembling normal. The tension from the warehouse, the anger, and the sleepless nights had dulled, replaced by a cautious calm. She joined me at the table, placing a cup of coffee in front of me. I could feel the faint warmth radiating from the mug, the aroma grounding me in the moment. We sat silently for a while, letting the quiet stretch between us, each of us processing what had happened. The fight, the betrayal, the confrontation, it had all passed, but its shadow lingered. I didn't want to rush the healing. I wanted it to take shape naturally, slowly, deliberately. "I'm going to call the bank today," she said finally, breaking the silence. "I need to straighten out the accounts, make sure everything is in order. No more secrets. Everything on the table." Her eyes met mine, earnest, and I could see the weight of responsibility in them. She was ready to take action, ready to face the consequences she had avoided. I nodded, appreciating her resolve. "Good, that's the first step," I said. "We deal with this together, and from now on, everything we do, we face it together. No more hiding, no more pretending. We've been through this, and if we can survive it, we can survive anything." Her lips curved into a faint smile, fragile but genuine. "I know," she said softly, "and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again. I swear." The moment felt honest, real. For the first time since the anonymous photo, I allowed myself to breathe fully, to believe that this wasn't the beginning of the end, but the start of a recovery. I could feel the weight of fear lifting, replaced by something steadier, determination. We weren't perfect, and the scars of the past week would remain, but we had faced the darkness together and emerged intact. We spent the day moving through small, ordinary routines, the kind of activities that, before all of this, I'd taken for granted. Laundry, dishes, cleaning the kitchen. Each mundane task felt like a reclamation of our life, a reminder that the foundations of home and family were still ours. With each action, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease, the knot in my chest loosen. In the afternoon, she suggested we go for a walk. The air outside was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of fallen leaves. We moved slowly through the neighborhood side by side, the quiet companionship a balm to both our frayed nerves. I noticed the way the sun glinted off the pavement, the distant laughter of children playing, the rhythmic hum of life continuing beyond our private chaos. For the first time in a week, it didn't feel like the world was conspiring against us. It felt like we had a chance to reclaim it. As we walked, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she laced her fingers with mine, a subtle but powerful gesture of reconnection. I felt the warmth of her grip, the steady pulse, and I realized that trust, like this walk, would have to be rebuilt step by step. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, but this first stride felt promising, grounding me in the possibility of healing. By the time we returned home, the sky was turning a soft shade of gold, the day slowly yielding to evening. I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope, not blind hope, but tempered, steady, the kind that grows from confronting the truth and surviving it. We had faced betrayal, deception, and fear. We had confronted it together, and we had emerged with a sense of control and direction. Standing in the kitchen, the faint scent of dinner cooking in the air, I realized that the journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I believed that whatever came next, we could face it, not as strangers bound by secrets, but as partners who had chosen, consciously, to rebuild. And in that moment, with the golden light spilling across the floor and her hand in mine, I felt the smallest, quietest victory of all. We were still us. The days that followed were quieter, but they carried a different kind of intensity. The kind that comes not from anger or betrayal, but from the deliberate work of rebuilding. Every conversation with her, every shared task, every glance carried weight. I noticed things I hadn't before. The small, unconscious gestures, the way she moved around the kitchen, the softness in her voice when she spoke directly to me. I realized trust wasn't something that came back all at once. It had to be earned, nurtured, rebuilt, brick by brick. I took the lead on reorganizing our finances. The debts that had caused so much secrecy were laid bare, the numbers sharp and unforgiving on the page. It was uncomfortable, exhausting work, but it felt like reclaiming territory that had been lost. She sat with me, reviewing statements, asking questions, occasionally brushing her hand against mine as we leaned over the table together. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. A signal that she was committed to transparency, that she was ready to face the consequences alongside me. We had conversations, long and sometimes tense, about the decisions she had made. I didn't let my anger dominate these talks. I focused on understanding. Every explanation, every confession she offered, added context, added clarity. And though my chest still tightened with the memory of betrayal, I felt the fog of confusion and rage begin to lift. I could see the full picture now, and it made it easier to plan for the future. One evening, she suggested we go to the park, where we used to walk when we first moved to the neighborhood. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and the earthy aroma of fallen leaves. We strolled along the familiar paths, side by side, letting the silence stretch between us comfortably this time. I noticed the way she occasionally glanced at me, the way her hand brushed against mine. Trust was still fragile, but it was growing. Every step, every shared moment reinforced it. "I want to make sure this never happens again," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mix of resolve and vulnerability. "No secrets, no lies. Whatever comes, we face it together." I nodded. "Agreed," I replied. The words felt heavier than they would have a week ago, filled with more than just intention. They carried the weight of experience, of survival, of a shared commitment. Back at home, I focused on the details of our daily lives, reclaiming control over routines that had once been small comforts but had become symbols of tension. I cooked, she cleaned, we organized, we planned. Every small action was a step toward restoring normalcy, toward healing the fractures that had opened in our marriage. The house felt lighter, the air warmer, as if it sensed the restoration of trust and honesty. At night, we would sit together on the couch, talking softly, sharing the kind of personal details that had been lost in the shadow of deception. It was quiet, almost mundane, but profoundly important. I noticed how her eyes softened when she spoke, how her smile no longer carried the tension of secrecy, how her hand rested naturally on mine without hesitation. These were the small victories, the subtle signs that progress was happening. One night, I realized something crucial. I wasn't just surviving this ordeal. I was learning from it, becoming stronger, more observant, more deliberate. I knew that life could throw challenges, betrayals, and tests at me, but I had proven, to myself, that I could face them and come out intact, even wiser, even more capable. And as I held her hand that evening, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the room, I felt a deep sense of resolve. Whatever the future held, I would not be caught off guard again. I would face it fully, consciously, and without fear. The storm had passed, but the lessons remained, and together, we could face anything. By now, our home had started to feel like our own again. Not the fragile, uncertain place it had been after the betrayal, but a space of deliberate calm. The tension that had once clung to the walls was fading, replaced by routines that carried both comfort and purpose. I could see it in her eyes, the way she moved through the rooms without hesitation, and in my own body, the way I no longer flinched at small sounds or imagined shadows where none existed. Trust, once fractured, was beginning to take shape again. We had created a new rhythm, one built on communication and transparency. I no longer wondered what she was doing when I wasn't around. She no longer feared my judgment when she faced challenges. There was still a cautiousness to our interactions, a careful negotiation of boundaries, but it was honest and deliberate. Every small gesture, pouring coffee for each other, sharing the small victories at work, even discussing bills openly, was a reinforcement of that trust. I found myself noticing her again, in ways I hadn't during the tension-filled days. The curve of her smile when she laughed softly, the way her hair caught the late afternoon light, the subtle warmth of her hand brushing against mine. It all reminded me why I had fallen in love with her in the first place. And I realized that this shared struggle, this test of our marriage, had deepened that bond rather than broken it. We had survived something difficult and emerged with a stronger foundation. One evening, after dinner, she suggested we take a drive. The air was crisp, tinged with the smell of wet leaves and the distant scent of the river. We drove quietly at first, listening to the faint hum of the tires against the asphalt, the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. Then slowly, the conversation began, soft and honest, about hopes, fears, and the small joys we had overlooked in our daily lives. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the shadow of betrayal lurking behind every word. We stopped at a quiet overlook, the city lights twinkling below like a constellation brought down to earth. She turned to me, eyes reflecting the glow of the skyline, and I realized that we were seeing each other fully again. Not just the surface, but the truths, the vulnerabilities, the strengths. "I'm grateful," she said quietly, "that we survived this, that you didn't give up on me, on us." I took her hand in mine, feeling the warmth and steadiness of her grip. "We survived because we faced it together," I replied. "And now, we build forward, not just back to where we were, but stronger, smarter, and more honest." She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. The cool night air wrapped around us, but inside, a sense of warmth settled deep in my chest. I could feel the tension of the past weeks melting away, replaced by something deliberate, steady, and real. The house, our home, was no longer a site of fear or uncertainty. It had become a sanctuary once more. When we returned, I noticed the small things with a newfound appreciation. The familiar creak of the staircase, the subtle smell of her perfume lingering in the hallway, the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Each detail, once mundane, now carried meaning, proof that life could be ordinary and still deeply comforting. That night, as I lay awake, I reflected on what had happened. The betrayal, the confrontation, the investigations, the revelations. It had been a storm, yes, but one that revealed both our vulnerabilities and our strengths. I realized that life would throw challenges at us, tests we couldn't always predict, but I also knew something more important. I could face them. I could navigate betrayal, uncertainty, and fear, and come out intact, stronger, smarter, more aware. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. We had survived. We had faced the truth. And together, we would keep moving forward, no longer bound by fear or secrecy, but by trust, respect, and the shared commitment to each other's lives. The morning light spilled through the blinds, warm and steady, washing the living room in gold. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of suspicion pressing on my chest. I could breathe freely, fully, without the constant tension that had become my companion. The house smelled of fresh coffee and breakfast, ordinary and comforting, and for the first time in days, it truly felt like home. She came into the room with a smile, carrying 2 mugs. Her eyes met mine, calm and sincere. No hesitation, no secrets, no shadows hiding between the lines of her expression. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," I replied, letting the words settle like a promise. I took my mug, feeling the warmth seep into my hands. The simple routine, coffee, quiet conversation, shared space, felt profound after the storm we had endured. It was ordinary, yes, but ordinary had become extraordinary. We sat together at the table, talking in low tones about plans for the week, bills, small errands, even the mundane things that before had seemed trivial. Every word, every glance, carried the weight of honesty and trust. I realized that life didn't need to be dramatic to be meaningful. It didn't need chaos or crisis to prove its depth. It only needed presence, commitment, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Later, we stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The neighborhood was quiet, the trees shedding their last leaves into gentle piles on the sidewalks. We walked side by side, the silence between us comfortable, not strained. I noticed her laugh again, natural this time, unguarded. I noticed the way she moved with ease, how her hand brushed lightly against mine when we passed by each other. These small moments, once taken for granted, now carried immense significance. "I feel like we're really back," she said softly, glancing up at me. "Like we can finally move forward without the past hanging over us." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "We are," I said. "And we will. Whatever comes next, we face it together. No lies, no secrets, just us, building forward." The day stretched on, quiet and uneventful, but in its simplicity lay a powerful affirmation: survival, reconciliation, and resilience. We cooked together, laughed over small mistakes in the kitchen, shared the kind of stories that used to be ordinary, but now felt sacred. Every interaction was a reminder that trust could be rebuilt, that love could endure even when tested by fear and deception. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She joined me, wrapping her arm around my waist, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. The warmth of her presence was steady, grounding. I realized then that the storm we had weathered hadn't just tested us, it had strengthened us. We were no longer fragile, unsure. We were deliberate, aware, and resilient. I took a deep breath, the air crisp and clean in my lungs, and let it fill me with a sense of finality and peace. The betrayal, the anger, the fear, they were behind us now, not erased but integrated into the story of who we were and who we had become. I could feel the weight lift, replaced with clarity and resolve. Turning to her, I said quietly, "We made it. Together." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that didn't hide anything, that carried trust, love, and hope all at once. "Together," she echoed. As the night settled around us, quiet and full of possibility, I realized that life wasn't about avoiding storms. It was about weathering them and coming out stronger on the other side. We had done that. We had faced betrayal, deception, fear, and uncertainty, and we had survived, not just as individuals, but as a team. The house was calm, the air warm, the night quiet, and for the first time in weeks I felt fully at peace, knowing that whatever came next, we would face it together, stronger, wiser, and unshakable. We had lost nothing that truly mattered. In fact, we had gained everything: trust, honesty, and the knowledge that we could endure anything, as long as we faced it together. And in that quiet, golden moment, I knew that life was ours again.